Thank you, and good morning to everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Ron Phillips. I am Vice President for Public Affairs here at the Animal Health Institute, which is the trade association that represents companies that make medicines for animals. Our topic this morning is illegal drug compounding, and to set the stage and to ensure that everybody knows exactly what it is we are talking about, let me just briefly talk through the ladder of options, medicine options that are available to veterinarians, pet owners, and others as they need medicines for their animals. First of all, of course, are those pioneer research-based drugs that are made by our members. These are drugs that are approved by the Food and Drug Administration. Companies must demonstrate through the submission of data that the drugs are both safe and efficacious for use, and they are approved, as I said, by FDA along the same, according to the same standard and in very much the same way as drugs for humans are. So at the top of this ladder, we have these research-based FDA-approved drugs. And then next on the ladder would be the generic drugs, generic animal drugs, which are also approved by FDA. Sponsors have to demonstrate that they are bioequivalent to the research-based drugs that they are mimicking, and thus they also carry those FDA safety and efficacy protections. That's as far as the safety and efficacy protections go. And then there is, beyond that, a class of compounded drugs, and I would break compounded drugs into three different categories. First is the customized manipulation of an FDA-approved drug. So it starts with an FDA-approved drug, and pharmacists or veterinarians can manipulate that drug upon the prescription of a veterinarian to meet the need of a particular patient or group of patients. This kind of compounding is clearly permitted in law, and we fully support this kind of compounding. A second category is the compounding of preparations or medicines from bulk active ingredients to meet the medical need of an individual patient under the prescription of a veterinarian within what is called a veterinarian client-patient relationship, or clearly the veterinarian has to be familiar with the animal for which the medication is being prepared. While these are technically illegal, compounding from bulk active ingredients is illegal under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. FDA allows, through enforcement discretion, some small amounts, some particular situations where it is needed. And again, where FDA permits this through enforcement discretion, we have no problem with it and support its continuation. None of those things are what we're here to talk about today. What we're here to talk about today is the final category of what we call illegal compounding, which is dangerous drug manufacturing under the guise of compounding. These are situations where compounders make preparations in large quantities, advertise them as cheap alternatives to approved drugs. These drugs mimic FDA-approved drug products, and these illegally compounded drugs carry none of those consumer protections that are afforded by the FDA approval process. We say they're dangerous as a result. In 2009, many of you may recall, there were 21 polo ponies who died in Florida as a result of a compounding error. And unfortunately, this was repeated this spring, where at least 10 horses suffered either death or serious illness as a result of illegal compounding in the states of Kentucky and Florida. So what we're here to discuss today is the impact of this rampant illegal activity and what needs to be done about it. We've asked three experts to give a brief presentation as a prelude to your questions today. First of all, we have Dr. Richard Carnevale, who is Vice President for Regulatory, Scientific, and International Affairs here at the Animal Health Institute. Dr. Carnevale before he joined AHI, held positions at both USDA and FDA. Next will be Dr. Scott Stanley, who is the professor at the UC Davis Veterinary School. He is the Associate Professor of Equine Chemistry and Director of the Equine Analytical Chemistry Lab at UC Davis. His lab is recognized as one of the largest and most respected equine drug testing labs in the world. And then third will be Peter Pitts. He is the president and co-founder of the Center for Medicine in the Public Interest, and in his prior life was the FDA Associate Commissioner for External Relations. So we've asked each of these gentlemen to make brief remarks, and then we'll open it up for questions, starting with Dr. Carnevale.
Thank you, Ron, and good morning, and thank you for participating in this call. As Ron said, illegal drug compounding has become a common practice with many pharmacies that claim to only be fulfilling patient and veterinarians' needs and are outside of FDA jurisdiction. But the truth is they've become very profitable black market manufacturers of unapproved drugs in violation of federal laws. They openly promote the availability of a wide variety of drugs and dosage forms, conduct business across the country, and even have marketing and customer service representatives that exhibit at trade shows and make sales calls to veterinarians' offices, trying to sell them more on price than medical need. They are far from the neighborhood pharmacist they like to portray as just filling a special need for Mrs. Jones' cat. The real problem is that they are making and selling drugs to unsuspecting veterinarians and owners that have none of the assurance of safety, efficacy, or quality of approved products, and they even go so far as to offer disclaimers that they are not responsible if the drug is not safe or effective. It has become a big business that thrives on producing mimics or close relations to approved products, or in many cases, completely untested and unique dosage forms. Because these pharmacies do not have to meet any of the very stringent FDA requirements for approved drugs, they can produce their products for pennies on the dollar and dramatically undercut legitimate pharmaceuticals. For a companion animal drug, it can take up to $70 million and 6 to 7 years, and even higher for food animals, to obtain FDA approval, with gross annual sales for many animal drugs of only about $1 million. They market their products to veterinarians as a way to contain drug costs, not to improve patient care, and their slick packaging and even trade names may actually dupe some veterinarians and owners into thinking they are FDA-approved products. So the impact on animals and their owners can be devastating if a compounded drug is unsafe, or at the very least doesn't work. As Ron mentioned, we have seen horses die in 2009 and again this year as a result of compounding errors. For the regulated industry, having to compete with illegal manufacturers clearly reduces the incentive to develop new safe and effective drugs. If the majority of a new drug sales are likely to be eaten up by illegal products, a company will be unlikely to invest the costs needed to get approval. A recent example is a drug called Pergolide, used to treat a metabolic condition in horses called equine Cushing's disease, which is caused by an excess production of hormones from the pituitary and adrenal glands. The company, Boehringer Ingelheim, was encouraged to develop and seek FDA approval, which they did in 2011. The sales of this drug have been severely undercut by unfair competition from compounders who have ignored FDA warning letters against compounding this drug. So the public needs to know the dangers and the false economies in using compounded products in place of approved drugs. However, AHI also understands there may be a legitimate need for bulk drug compounding when there are no approved animal or human products available. FDA has established a list of specific conditions for which they have stated they would use regulatory discretion and not enforce the requirements for approval. We would support FDA identifying additional drugs where such discretion would be appropriate. However, The problem now is that FDA is not enforcing the egregious practices that are ongoing, which is leading to many of the problems we have talked about. It was only 1 month after an industry team met with FDA to urge them to take stronger actions that more horses died of illegally compounded drugs. So with that, I'll now turn the microphone over to Dr. Stanley, who will tell you about his experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. So at the University of California, Davis, we have been following the issue of veterinary compounding for a better part of 12 or 13 years. The concerns that we've seen in the industry, specifically in horses, is potency and stability of product. We've tested a large number of those products over time. We've continued to have issues related to how those products are used. We know that you can use an FDA-approved product for other animal species and for humans appropriately and safely. Those can be mixed into formulations that are more appropriate for other animal species, but that is not the way the industry has moved forward. Almost all of our investigations have found bulk product as the source of the compounding pharmaceutical ingredient. Many, if not all of those, are being brought in from foreign manufacturers without appropriate quality measures, without appropriate quality control and appropriate testing for potency. We've undertaken a variety of investigations looking at the comparison of FDA-approved product compared to the pirated products that are out there on the market, and found extreme under-potency determinations, products that are only 20% of the label claim, and we've found products that are as much as 400% of the label claim. Both of those can have extreme circumstance and adverse effects when treating the patient. What our concern is that when a veterinarian is prescribing these products, they're no longer able to discern what the concentration is, how often to treat, how frequently to treat, what the animal's condition will be after treatment. And one of the things that I continually remind the veterinarians is that in animal health care situations where they're prescribing a compounded formulation, the veterinarian assumes all the liability of a compounding efficacy failure or adverse event. It's not the same for a human physician. It's all the liability is the veterinarian, and they're in a circumstance where they can't control that in some cases. We've tested commercial products compared to omeprazole, finding 20% of the label claim of the omeprazole active ingredient, and clenbuterol, where it's a dangerous concentration of clenbuterol as compared to the commercially FDA-approved formulation of vetapulmin. More recently, we've undertaken investigations looking at some of the products that were involved with the Whitcliffe Pharmacy, investigating the circumstance where they had 17 to 20 times the potency of the pyrimethamine active ingredient that resulted in 4 horses dying and 6 others becoming incapable to compete any longer. The catastrophic losses that are occurring with this are significant, and they're not underplayed in the industry regarding animal health care. The other thing that people don't often understand is when you have a 1,000-pound horse that becomes debilitated by a drug like this, resulting in seizure and fever, these animals suffer greatly. They're put in a circumstance where they're fairly uncontrollable because of their large size, weighing 1,000 pounds, and people are being put at risk as well because they have to try and restrain and try and help these animals that are in extreme distress. So there's a human element involved in these circumstances as well as a veterinary element regarding these particular products. We're finding more and more illegal product that are being brought in and undercutting the price of the commercially available FDA-approved pioneer products and the generics as well. So we're finding less development of new animal health care products for horses and companion animals as well. Our concern is that as this continues to expand, we'll find no new animal health care products that are being investigated because the market won't support that entity. And now I'd like to turn it over to Peter Pitts.
Thank you very much. It's important to remember that compounding of bulk drug substances is illegal and dangerous and it's in violation of Section 501A5 of the Food Drug Administration Modernization Act, FDAMA. The only exception, it's important to note, is for compounding of approved human or animal drugs for legal extra-label use, generally for one or more or a small group of animals by a trained professional. Let me be clear. Compounding from bulk drug substances for mass sales, for any sales, is illegal. According to the FDA, all preparations compounded from bulk drug substances are considered new animal drugs within the meaning of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act. They are unsafe unless approved and subject to the adulteration and misbranding provisions of the FD&C Act. And multiple decisions from the 3rd, 5th, and 7th Circuits of the Court of Appeals agree. The two words to remember are illegal and dangerous. These drugs are being provided to vets by criminal compounders. They are illegal and unregulated pharmaceutical manufacturers. And the result is a lack of quality and dead animals. Pharmacies masquerading as manufacturers cannot be allowed to ignore the law and put animal health at risk by selling cheap, substandard, and illegal knockoff medicines. These drugs are no bargains. The FDA, to its credit, has stepped up its game when it comes to human compounding. It's time that they get in the game when it comes to illegal and deadly animal drug compounding. Thank you.